2012, Apple changed the game for the iPod Touch for the 5th generation. Let's just talk about some of the designs about this thing to begin with. Had a 4-inch Retina display with 326 pixels per inch, which is actually the same as the iPhone 11, so content on here looks really good, especially for a device this old. Looking at this, its thickness actually looks really thin. It's actually 6.1 millimeters thick, which ends up being thinner than the older generations. It got the first lightning jack for the iPod series, which is very cool. And it overall had a very small footprint to it as well. It's very light as well. I would say between these two, they seem almost the same. This one might be a bit heavier, so this was very light of a device, which is really nice. It almost feels like you're holding nothing. It's kind of funny, especially with how small it is too. In terms of horsepower, this thing is down on power kind of badly. It had Apple's A5 chip, which is a dual core, and it was rated for 1 gigahertz, although I saw some information online saying it was downclocked to 800 megahertz for this device. So I'm not sure what that's about, but if you guys have any ideas, let me know in the comment section down below. But moving on, this type of hardware actually relates to the iPhone 4S very similarly, where it only had the A5 chip and it also had only 512 megabytes of RAM, and they both ended up on iOS 9.3.5, so it's probably because they're both the same hardware almost. The camera was a 5 megapixel camera on the back. It could shoot for 1080p at 30 fps, which is okay for back then, but not really great by today's standards. And the front was a 1.2 megapixel camera that was only rated for 720p at 30 fps. And you'll see here in a second just the differences between the iPhone 11 and the iPod 5 for terms of camera. And you'll really see the difference between these, because in the daylight, the iPod 5, it looks okay when it's in a well-lit area, and you can get some sharp images, but in general, they're nowhere near as sharp as the iPhone 11 in terms of camera quality. And in low light, the iPod 5 really starts struggling in low light, where it starts getting really grainy. You kind of need full brightness for it to actually look good, which is kind of upsetting, but I mean, this thing is like 9 years old now. You can't get too upset with it. But it would have been a lot nicer if Apple have added on a better camera with this, such as the iPhone 5 camera or even the iPhone 4S camera. Those both would have been better in general. But I can kind of see why they didn't. It had a lot of awesome tech with it, like the screen and the lightning jack. It's kind of cool to have that. So they kind of had cut some corners for such a cheap device. What apps can you actually use? Not many. Netflix was the only movie that actually, like, only movie site you could actually get working on here. Like Hulu won't install, Disney Plus won't install, which those are the two other major ones, but Netflix does install it and it does work. It's kind of laggy and slow, but just be glad it works on here. Yeah, it's cool that it works, but it's kind of a laggy experience, but it's kind of the fault of the iPod and not really the fault of Netflix. Other apps that work, Spotify and iTunes, they both work, and they work okay, although Spotify, I know, is a bit more lagging when you start scrolling through quickly through songs. On your phone, like an iPhone 11 or so, or some newer phone, it's really smooth. But on here, it can be really laggy and kind of slow. When you click on something, it takes time on Spotify, or when you sync up to a Bluetooth device, sometimes it doesn't volume adjust as quickly as you'd hope, which is kind of weird. Like when you click, it would take an extra second, which is kind of weird from what I've experienced. It's okay on Spotify. It is an older version too. Spotify, the current version, looks a little bit newer, and the homepage doesn't even really work on here in Spotify either. It just says to load in the browser, which is kind of weird. iTunes works actually decently well, a bit better than Spotify, probably because it's proprietary on here. Putting music on here from your computer works pretty well too, which is kind of nice. It goes really quick. It's faster than the old iPod Classics, but would I really use this in 2021? I don't think so. as a plain music device, I think it would work really well, and I think that part of it's really good. Streaming content isn't the greatest 'cause it's such a small screen. It's only 4 inches. And I have iPads and an iPhone as well with way bigger screens, which I would rather watch videos on those with higher resolution and overall bigger screen too. Um, the only real purpose I can see for this device is the fact that there's a headphone jack, which is kind of nice since most new devices don't have it anymore. And you could just use it as a music device and play some old games on it too. Because I actually found out Battle Royale, like Clash Royale, sorry, actually does work on here. Although I haven't played around with it too much. It actually does work, which is kind of weird. But you could use this for music if you really felt inclined to, although I'd almost rather point you in the direction of getting an old iPod Classic or Mini, since, I mean, if you're only using it for music, why get this with a screen and all the other stuff if you can get something with just music and it doesn't lag? But I guess for Spotify, having access to Spotify would be a major bonus to this thing. So if you can pick it up for around the same price of a Classic with decent storage, it's not half bad, especially if you only use it, like I said, for music. But I wouldn't use this in 2021 if it was me, and where its current state is too. I would love to test an iPod 6 or an iPod 7, so if you guys would like to see that, leave a comment below, leave a like, because I would love to see how those devices have functioned throughout the year.